Hello and welcome to Hamer Reviews. My name is Christopher Hamer and today I'm reviewing Canon's EOS R5, their top-end mirrorless camera. This is a 45 megapixel sensor full-frame camera which costs £4,000, can shoot up to 20 frames per second, can shoot 8K raw video in camera and is pretty stunning, to be honest. In order to test it out, I have rented what I think are the best RF lenses that are available at the moment. So we've got the holy trinity for the RF system, the 15 to 35, the 24 to 70 and the 70 to 200 2.8L lenses. I also picked what I thought were the most interesting high-end lenses that Canon offers, the 28 to 70 f2, which I think is simply sublime, and the 85 1.2 defocus smoothing. In combination, I've spent a decent amount of time with these lenses and I have had a blast testing them out. The Canon EOS R5 really impressed me at all points, to be completely honest. It is an extremely capable camera. The video mode is obviously one of the headline features, 8K raw video in camera. Now, although that's true, I did find the files huge. It can only really record for about 8 minutes. You fill up your storage media faster than I've ever seen before, but the footage that comes from it is fantastic. Now, to edit it, you kind of need to learn a few tricks in terms of creating proxies or rendering it out early before editing. But once you've done that, it is fairly easy to work with and the results are great. Now, as I've actually upgraded this camera to the 1.3 firmware, which was released at the end of March, I was able to use Canon's new CLOG 3, which is something they've added support to for this camera. So shooting in 4K in CLOG 3, the footage looks fantastic and is very, very capable. This is a great hybrid camera because of its video features. The 4K high quality looks great. I also outputted that to an Atomos Ninja 5, which I usually use with my Nikon Z6 II, and the footage recorded great, was easy to work with, genuinely a blast to use. Now, obviously, it is also a great stills camera and it can shoot up to 20 frames per second in high extended mode, but in standard high mode, you're still getting 12 frames per second with full metering and full autofocus. And one of the reasons this camera is so good when you're shooting in video or stills is the fantastic autofocus system. There are no two ways about it. The autofocus in this is the best of any camera I've ever used. Now, bearing in mind, I haven't used the latest and greatest Sonys. I haven't had my hands on an Alpha 1 yet, for instance, but this is just incredible. What I love about the autofocus in this is how intelligent it is. And that's really, for me, the differences between shooting on my Nikon system and shooting on this. When I'm, for instance, not shooting faces, whether it's animal or people, just shooting objects, it can actually tell you where it's focusing. It moves its boxes around to show you what's in focus, what isn't. I'm not talking about focus peaking here. I'm simply talking about its intelligent autofocus system showing you what exactly it is that it thinks is the focus. Although it's not perfect, I have to say that more than 95% of the time, it was bang on. And to me, that's really, really impressive. The eye autofocus, both for animals and people, was pretty infallible. It worked from a number of meters away, whether that's on an animal or on a person. It was pretty impressive, and what I also liked is it didn't matter which lens I was using, it worked effectively. I think the part of the reason the autofocus is so good is that this has really good in-body image stabilization, which helps obviously to keep the sensor nice and still, which helps the camera to work out exactly what you're doing. So it will actually give you 5 stops of vibration reduction, to use Nikon's terminology there. But the in-body image stabilization is good, and it also works in combination with the image stabilization built into the lenses, for instance, on the 15-35 to 24-70 and the 70-200. So you can actually use those in tandem, which in some cases I've got shots sharp down to half a second, which is pretty impressive, to be honest with you. The sensor in this is great. 45 megapixels is more than enough in most scenarios, if you ask me. It renders images very nice. In terms of color, maybe this is something where this comes down to preference, right? I find this camera a little bit on the blue-green side, more so than on the warmer tones. So my photos always looked a little bit cooler than I'm used to with the white balance settings in the standard. Now, personally, I would usually shoot with the Nikon system, and I'm just used to slightly warmer colors. They looked a bit different in here, but that's fine. It's nothing you can't change in your raw photos, and it's not an issue with the camera. It's just something that's a bit different. So image quality is good. The range of RF lenses is fantastic. I mean, just these ones here are great, but there's a whole load of others available, including budget lenses and high-end lenses. Some of the things I love is Canon's gone out of their way to make interesting lenses. So for instance, a 600mm f11 and an 800mm f11, both of which would work really well with this camera, and I look forward to reviewing in the future. There are some things I dislike about the R5. I don't like the confusing menu system. So one of the things which people might not know if you subscribe to the channel is I actually started out in mirrorless with the EOS RP and the 24-105 RF lens. I love the 24-105. I think it's a great lens, and I really look forward to using it with the Nikon system. Apologies for all the chimes. I'm shooting somewhere where I don't usually shoot, hence all the chiming. But one of those things. As I was saying, buttons and controls. So the menu is still confusing to me. It's been updated since the RP, but I just don't like the layout. I find it takes me a while to get to things. Things disappear and show up depending which mode you're in, which I really hate. But overall, it's all right. I think it takes more time to learn this than it would a Nikon system, to be completely honest. The button layout equally. So this is another thing. Canon loves their scroll wheel, and I'm afraid I hate it. I really wish this had a D-pad. I know you have the little focus selector up here, which can be used to go through the menu and so on. It's just a bit cumbersome. I don't like it very much. And if you really want to go through the menu effectively, you're actually using the top dial, the mode dial, and the scroll wheel all at the same time in order to change menu settings quickly and efficiently, and it's really confusing and I don't like it. I'm sorry. It's just me. I don't like the fact that the on-off switch is over here on the side and not on the shutter button. Again, this is something I'm used to from shooting with a Nikon, so if you've always shot with a Canon, this probably won't bug you. But for me, being able to switch the camera on and off as I'm using it with the shutter button is great, because it means I can turn the camera off between shots, extend my battery life. Can't do that on the R5. I either left the camera on or off. The good news is that the battery life is good in this camera. I got well over 1,000 shots per charge on the battery. It charges over USB-C. Though it is picky, it must be said, this does need a good power delivery certified charger to work effectively. So some of my standard power banks with a USB-C cable would not charge this camera, where they will charge my Z6 II. However, my slightly higher powered battery chargers that we had power delivery with a USB-C to USB-C cable worked fine. So do bear that in mind. Another thing that kind of bugs me, to be honest with you, is that this has micro HDMI. It's a really small HDMI connector. I've broken them in the past on my Z50, the cables. They're a bit flimsy for the most part. I would have much preferred to have seen mini HDMI or even full-size HDMI. It felt like there was enough space here and they cheaped out. But okay, you have a mic input, you have a headphone output, so really reinforcing the video credentials of this. You also have a flash sync port, which I thought was nice too. It has a decent amount of customizable buttons. So you've got your custom button down here that mostly is used to set the aperture, but you can set it to do other things. A lot of the other buttons can be customized. I like the quick menu. I like the magnification button and the info button. All those work well. Though I find it a bit weird. Again, maybe this is because I'm a Nikon shooter and it's different implementations, but having to click mode, then info to get into video modes seems a little bit cumbersome, to be honest. Nikon's done really well, in my opinion, with their mirrorless cameras, whereby if I want to switch between video and stills, there's just a switch on the Z50, on the Z6, and on the Z7, etc. Simple switch, switch to switch, and everything's changed to video. It just takes a bit longer, so you can't switch very quickly. I don't understand why you have on a Canon system a light button to switch on the display light backlight. Is that really normal? I haven't used that many bodies. I can't remember what it was like on the EOS RP, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, kind of weird to have to switch that on if I want the backlight on. So an odd thing, but bear that in mind. Overall though, it is a super ergonomic body. I will give Canon that any day of the week. It feels good in the hand. It feels very different to my Nikon. It's like a chunky grip, and it has a quite a nice sort of curve for your finger where the shutter button is. It feels as comfortable as the Nikon's to hold, so that's a good thing. Though this edge at the bottom I find is a bit sharper to what I'm used to on my Nikon cameras. It does have built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth that work well with the free Canon app. I use that a fair bit. It's great to be able to tag GPS data onto my photos using that. And I did do so all the time, and it didn't impact battery life, which is nice. But equally, if you just want to use it as a remote shutter, works really well. Preview on your phone, overall, no issues. As I said, the in-body image stabilization is good. Decent amount of buttons, though not necessarily always the ones I wanted. Now, another thing this camera has is a fully articulating touchscreen. Now, that's generally speaking a good thing. I think it's useful to have that. It does mean I'd be a bit worried about putting a screen protector on it because I feel like it would clash if you fold the screen inwards with the way it sits flush. But if you do want to protect the screen when you're not using the camera, you can obviously flip it closed and you have a nice plastic back here, which is protecting the screen. So nice screen, nice to be able to have a tilt flip screen. I'm not sure I'd use it for vlogging though, to be honest. It's quite heavy, especially with some of these lenses, but you do have the option. So it's never a bad thing to have options, right? Usual flash sync port. I'm really sorry, I don't have a Canon Pro Flash. I have a cheap Neewer one, but in all honesty, it's pretty crap, and I wouldn't want to give you any idea of the flash performance on this camera. It does not have a built-in flash, as is pretty standard on pro-level cameras like this. At £4,000, this is not a cheap camera, but the video quality that comes from this is exceptional. The stills quality that comes from this camera is very, very good. The raw photographs are very nice. The high ISO performance, I was actually very impressed by. I have no complaints at all with the high ISO performance of this camera. It's shot pretty well up to ISO 3200 without any issues, and I used it above that a few times and the photo still looked good to me. So overall, very impressed with the high ISO performance. Goes down to ISO 100. Now, if I think about the Nikon Z7 II, actually goes down to ISO 64, which actually is quite useful in many situations, something that you don't have natively on this. But they both go up to 51,200 as their max ISO. So yeah, overall, it's a great camera. It's not too heavy, which is also good. I think that Canon could have easily made this a chunkier camera, but they didn't. And something that I think is really interesting about this is how versatile this is. So usually to me, I can go like, this is a sports camera, this is an events camera, or this is a portraiture camera. Like for instance, if I think of Nikon's camera line, or even actually Canon's to a certain extent, for me, the D800 series, D810, D850 were like the camera you'd have in a portrait studio environment, the camera you'd take like an advertising shot with. And to a certain extent, I always felt that was sort of the 5D series by Canon. Then if you wanted to be a sports photographer, you'd be using like a 1D series camera, or you'd be using a Nikon D4, D5, D6. With this, I kind of feel like it's genuinely a master of all trades. If I was shooting video, I'd feel super comfortable using this. The autofocus is so good. It feels great that you could use it. I think you can get RF cine lenses, or you will be able to get, I think. So you could even have those. The 4K is good, as is the 8K. Then stills-wise, the autofocus is great. It works well. There's a good range of lenses available. So it can do pretty much everything if you need a sports camera. This is doing, 20 frames per second in high extended, or even 12 with AF and exposure. Like, that's pretty impressive. You could shoot a wedding with this one day, shoot in a studio with the 85 1.2 defocus smoothing another, and then be out shooting video on the third day. And to be completely honest with you, I think you'd get great results from all of them. There is a slight caveat on the video, and I do not want to dwell on this because I'm aware that everyone's aware of it, but this camera does have an overheating issue. If you're shooting 8K video, you're going to be quite limited by overheating, and you're also going to be limited in 4K. If you shoot a lot in high temperatures, you're going to hit overheating as well. Now, full disclosure, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to show people how long it takes for it to overheat in 4K video, but I couldn't make it happen. Maybe it's too cold. We're having a bit of a cold snap at the moment, and it is cold outside, so I wasn't able to replicate that. And I shot for like well over an hour and I didn't hit it. So for me, that means the 4K footage isn't going to be an issue. I wasn't going to mess around with 8K because I don't have enough storage to truly overheat this thing. But it is reported often that it overheats, so just bear that in mind. If you're going to be shooting, if you want this for 8K video, or you want this for lots and lots of 4K video, you might run into an issue. There is, however, very little wrong with this camera. Beyond the menu system and some of the button layouts and the way it works, which I'm not used to and therefore maybe don't like, the color not being 100% what I'm used to and therefore don't like as much as what I usually use, and the overheating issue, that's kind of the only issue. I think that the menu's the only thing that lets this down for me. The main reason why I will not move to this or potentially the R6 once I get my hands on it and test it is this is a £4,000 camera body, which is £1,000 more than the Z7 II. And as much as it has a few extra features, it doesn't blow me away in the way that I think that I really need those extra features. It's great. And also RF lenses are phenomenal, but they're also expensive. It's not to say Z-mount lenses aren't cheap. Mostly they're very similarly priced where we have them available. But it just means that for me personally, there's no logic to switching systems at the moment, despite the better autofocus, because I am happy with the Z system autofocus. It just isn't as good as this. I hope that we see Nikon catching up and bringing out something that's as good at autofocus as this, because there is a difference, it is real, and yeah, there is something in it. But if you're a Canon shooter, or if you're looking for a new mirrorless camera, this isn't a bad choice. If you have the money to spend, and bear in mind, £4,000 for the camera body is one thing, but you want the 15 to 35, that's another 2,200. You want the 24 to 70, that's another 2,000. You want the 70 to 200, another 2,800. It is a £10,000 investment plus and the rest basically in order to get this camera in the Holy Trinity. So, and that's not even talking about adding a £3,200 28 to 70 f2 or £3,000 85 1.2 defocus moving. So it's expensive, but there is a reason for that. It is probably one of the best cameras on the market today. And even as a Nikon shooter, I have no issue saying that. I have no beef with Canon, I have no beef with Sony. They're great systems and there's merit in all of them. So yeah, I completely recommend it. The R5 is a phenomenal camera. I hope you found this review useful. I decided not to drill into the specs too much because I could tell you it has more than 3,000 autofocus points, but is that truly useful to you? You probably want to know what it works like, and I think it works really well. If you have any questions, pop them in the comment section. I'd love to know what you think. I'd love to know if you have an R5, if you used one, what you thought about it. Did you choose this after trying it out, or did you go with something else? If you went with something else, why? Equally, if you have any questions about it, let me know. I'll try and answer them as best I can. Make sure you subscribe because I've got lots of other RF content coming, as this table might allude to. Lots of lens reviews, some phenomenal ones, a comparison between 28-70 and 24-70. I love these two lenses, especially this 28-70. If I could actually, sorry, I was going to finish the video, but I'm going to say one last thing. If I could have any of these lenses on a Nikon camera, it would be this 28-70 f2. It's hard to justify the £3,000 price tag in my head, but I'd give up my 24-70 in a heartbeat for a 28-70 f2 and an extra £1,000 out of my pocket, because this is such a versatile lens. It's like Canon's RF lenses. They caught up so fast with high quality glass and then brought out a great body, and it's sort of the opposite to what a lot of other manufacturers did. And you just look at them and there's just so many great choices, and I think that's what's impressive about the RF system at the moment. So as I was saying, please do subscribe, like the video, questions below, and yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I do hope I see you again next time. Goodbye.